Hey folks, this is Kelani. The Warfronts have finally opened up properly for the first time on live servers, and it seems like there's a lot of confusion about how the whole system works. I don't really blame anyone for not fully understanding the back and forth of the Warfront system, because it's never truly laid out properly in-game. There's also the issue of the content being only available to one faction at a time, which wouldn't be all too bad on its own, except the changeover between factions appears to be a very lengthy process. So let's have a look at the complaints surrounding Warfronts, why a lot of people seem to be frustrated, and what Blizzard could have done better to help make Warfronts feel like a finished piece of content. So the Horde can actually queue into the scenario right now, which is kind of the main piece of the whole puzzle when it comes to Warfronts themselves. There's a lot of different bits and pieces which are available at different times depending on the current state of Warfronts, so I guess we should go through that first to clear up any confusion. The Warfronts will cycle through contribution and scenario phases, which swap factions as they come up. So it started with the Alliance controlling the Warfront, with the Horde in their contribution phase. At this point, the Alliance has a portal down to Arathi Highlands while the Horde does not. The Horde can get an NPC teleport down for the initial quest, but their portal won't be active until they actually control Arathi. The Alliance also has access to the Arathi World Boss, which drops 370 item level loot. Again, the Horde will have to wait for their chance at 370 loot until they control Arathi for themselves. There are also plenty of rare monsters scattered around Arathi Highlands which can drop toys, mounts, pets, and 340 gear. The Alliance will have camps and guards, which makes farming those rares a little easier, especially if you have war mode enabled, but the Horde can still fly down there to get some rare farming of their own done. During this time, the Horde have access to the contribution quests, which require various materials and crafts from every profession, as well as a gold and resource quest. These quests award 500 artifact power each, 150 reputation with the Honorbound or 7th Legion, and are supposed to help your contribution time go faster. This phase ends when the contribution meter hits 100%. Whether or not the quests actually contribute towards this is under heavy speculation, and a lot of people seem to think this is just a simple timer. If it is a timer, it looks like the contribution phase will last for nearly a week. Then we move into an actual scenario phase where the Horde has access to the Warfront scenario, and that's pretty much the only thing that changes. The scenario itself should take you maybe 15 to 25 minutes to complete, rewards 340 gear upon completion, and there's a weekly quest which awards a one-time 370 item. This phase lasts for 7 days and actually has a timer showing you how long you have left to join in on the fun. After that timer runs out, the Horde will control Arathi and get a portal for quick travel between the port and Arathi Highlands. Their world boss will come up for that extra chance at some sweet loot, and all of the guards and camps in Arathi will change over to the Horde as well. The Alliance in the meantime will start their contribution phase. Lots of quests which reward a good amount of AP and rep but don't seem to have any effect on the contribution percentage itself. The scenario becomes inactive again and everyone just stands around with their thumbs up their butt waiting for the contribution to complete. And then the Alliance get to play the scenario and everything resets from there. So each Warfront cycle will take around about 4 weeks, probably just short of that. Each faction will control Arathi for 2 weeks of each cycle, which also means 2 weeks of the world boss being active and having the quick travel portals. The Warfront scenario itself will only be up for 1 week for each faction per Warfront cycle, and each faction will only get the contribution quests for 1 week each cycle as well. That's a whole lot of time between the major parts of this new form of content, which is really kind of confusing to me. I think if you doubled the pace of the entire cycle, a lot of players would probably feel a lot better about the whole thing, especially when you have weekly restrictions tied to a lot of the Warfront rewards. If the 370 quest is weekly, you're only going to get one of those done per cycle instead of done per week. The contribution rewards a nice chunk of AP and rep, but again, it's not a weekly reward at this point, it's more of a monthly reward. The world boss is active for 2 weeks out of every 4, so you have 2 weeks with the boss and then 2 weeks without it. It's just a lot of back and forth and a lot of time waiting doing nothing overall. If the cycle was reduced to 2 weeks instead of 4, everything moves faster and everyone gets a few more rewards. That keeps most of the key parts of the Warfront system to a weekly or bi-weekly event instead of a near monthly activity. The only saving grace I can find to this current cycle is that doubling the speed would lock certain sections of the event to very specific days. Scenarios would be only available in the back half of the week, while contributions would be available in the front half. If you can't play for whatever reason on some of those days, you might miss out every single week. Keeping the cycle on a weekly basis means every part of the cycle hits pretty much every day of the week, so it gives everyone a chance to do their little part. Perhaps the lengthy wait wouldn't be too bad if we actually had some cool stuff to look forward to or to do each cycle, but there isn't really all that much to get done. You can pop down to Arathi and clear out some of the rares if you really want to. The gear might be useful for players who are still trying to get into Mythic 0 dungeons, but it's also not guaranteed loot. The pets and mounts could be really cool as well, but if island expeditions are anything to go by, they're probably going to have awful drop rates. The world boss is definitely something that should be on your list, but that's 5 minutes out of your entire week. Even the scenario itself isn't all too worthwhile when it comes to running content over and over again. Most of the players in my guild will run it once to see it and to get the 370 piece, and then probably ignore it until it comes around again. I wouldn't be surprised if the lack of content that really sticks, added to the lengthy wait in between cycles, leads to people simply forgetting that Warfronts was supposed to be a major piece of content in Battle for Azeroth. Adding up everything on offer and all the rewards each cycle is also fairly quick. Every 4-week cycle of Warfronts, you can get 1 370 item from the scenario quest, 2 chances at 370 items from the 2 weeks of world boss kills, 500 AP and 150 rep for every contribution quest you turn in, with a max of 11 turn-ins for 5,500 AP and 1650 rep. 1 week of being able to run Warfronts over and over again for 340 loot and transmog, and then varying rewards from the rares in Arathi itself, with 2 weeks of quick travel via the portal. Most of the Arathi rares also seem to be a weekly lockout, so that's probably either 2 weeks if you can't be bothered to fly down, or 4 weeks if you can. That would be a huge amount of potential gear and rewards for a single week, but when you water it down over 4 weeks, it really isn't all too special. And then we have the scenario itself. I feel really bad for Alliance players in this whole story because they're not going to get their hands on the scenario for another 2 weeks, so they had to wait the 3 weeks since launch, only to be told that the way the system is designed means they have to wait another 3 weeks before they can actually do the most exciting part. And it's not even that amazing. Don't get me wrong, I think Warfronts are an awesome concept, and they're pretty fun the first time you run it, but besides the end boss changing every now and then, there isn't really anything too exciting or new or different each time you run it. At least island expeditions change maps, events, monsters and rewards. Warfronts are the same map every time, the same layout with the same objectives, and ultimately you'll end up doing the same thing to win because you have to create demolishers, farm up resources, build demolishers and push down the middle lane. I really worry that Warfronts are going to have the same Zerg mentality that islands have devolved into, except you probably won't see as many players running Warfronts because the gameplay really isn't all that great for repeated playthroughs, and the rewards aren't anything too special either. At least islands give a good chunk of artifact power, so how could the Warfront system be improved to solve a few of these issues? A difficulty slider could do a great deal towards helping the replayability, and it seems like something that's simply missing instead of purposefully not included. Increasing the difficulty of content for increased rewards is one of the main foundations of World of Warcraft. I don't understand why it wasn't included in Warfronts, especially when you can't really lose a Warfront right now. Maybe that's why the rewards aren't that great. If you can only ever win your Warfront, well, they can't exactly offer you up any crazy rewards, can they? Having a heroic and mythic version could be interesting and help develop some sort of drive to actually take part in Warfronts, especially if you also introduce some achievements to go along with them. But perhaps the coolest difficulty option for Warfronts, which in my opinion seems to be a huge missed opportunity, would be the PvP option from Islands. This is supposed to be an epic battle between the Horde and the Alliance. A few tweaks here and there could turn Warfronts into an amazing battleground experience. I wonder if they'll keep that option in mind when creating future Warfronts. Which brings me to potentially the most important part of this entire discussion. I think pretty much every problem that players have right now could have been solved simply by having another Warfront. Another Warfront would have given the dev team the option of having these lengthy cycles but having them inverted, so the Horde start with one Warfront while the Alliance starts with another. Each would have a scenario while the other does, each would have a contribution phase while the other does, and then you could also get a change of pace every 2 weeks instead of going back into the same Warfront doing the same thing over and over again. I think a second Warfront would have fixed so many issues here, but hopefully as we progress into the Battle for Azeroth, we'll see more Warfronts added into the mix. So we might be in this situation eventually. Keep your fingers crossed. I'm assuming that both Island Expeditions and Warfronts will see extensive additions to their overall systems and map options by the time Battle for Azeroth is over, and I can't help but wonder if either of these systems will be taken forward into the next expansion. I think that's the key factor which shows whether or not a system was truly successful. If they ditch it going into the next chapter of World of Warcraft, obviously the team didn't think it did that well. But that's my thoughts on the Warfront cycle and what I would love to see in the future. What do you think of the Warfronts so far? I guess I should probably ask that in a few weeks when the Alliance can actually try it out for themselves. So how do you feel about having to wait so long? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on the screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.